of an official proceeding. Moments ago, the court limiting what charges can be brought against those January 6th defendants. Let's get right to ABC's senior national correspondent Terry Moran at the Supreme Court. So, Terry, break down what this decision means.
This is a potential win for this defendant, a man who stormed the Capitol on January 6th and was charged with this obstruction of an official proceeding crime. And for those other defendants, perhaps even including Donald Trump. I want to say potential because how this is applied matters. But here's the bottom line. This law, as you say, was originally written to address financial and business crimes passed in the wake of the Enron scandal. And the first part of it says that whoever alters, destroys, mutilates, or conceals a record, a document, or other object, and then it says, or otherwise obstructs an official proceeding. And the question was, is this crime, are these crimes limited to documents and records, as the first clause suggests, or does the otherwise say any kind of obstruction of an official proceeding, including storming the Capitol, counts? In a 6-3 opinion written by Chief Justice John Roberts, Roberts says you can't transform this statute that has to deal with documents and business crime and the like into an all-purpose catch-all obstruction of justice, obstruction of official proceedings count. So it's a win for Mr. Joseph Fisher, the man who stormed the Capitol and brought this case. It seems, because the question is, does that get him off the hook? Does it get Donald Trump off the hook? And there is a possibility that in storming the Capitol, they interfered with the process of documents, the electoral count votes that were being certified that day. That's a question for the lower courts. But the court has essentially shut down what the special counsel and the Justice Department was trying to use this law for, obstruction of official proceeding, to use it to apply in general to anyone who stormed the Capitol. That can't be. It has to be tethered to documents, records, and the like, just as the first part of the law says.
Terry Moran for us, thank you. Let's also bring in ABC's senior Washington reporter, Devin Dwyer. And Devin, I know Terry was talking about those 300 defendants, those January 6 rioters, but also what do we know about what this could mean for former President Donald Trump?
Well, with 2 of the 4 charges against Donald Trump in the election interference case that Jack Smith has been assembling involve this particular part of the law, 1512C2 in that financial law that Terry was just talking about. And so there was real concern here that if the Supreme Court would throw out this particular charge against January 6 rioters, that it would mean Donald Trump, half the case potentially about Donald Trump could get tossed out or invalidated. That is not the case here. This decision by the Supreme Court is very measured. It's narrow. It's basically laying out, as Terry just said, that anytime those charges are going to be brought under that part of the law, there has to be some connection to documents and records being destroyed. That's still very much in play. So should the special counsel be able to proceed in his prosecution? And that's an open question. We'll hear from the Supreme Court on Monday whether Donald Trump has immunity or whether this can go forward. Special counsel Jack Smith will have to show very specifically that obstruction is linked to documents and records.
Yeah, that big decision on immunity is still to come. Let's go ahead and bring in ABC News Supreme Court contributor Kate Shaw. And Kate, this might be confusing to some of our viewers because we're talking about the interpretation of a 2002 financial crimes law in the wake of the Enron scandal. But help us understand more about this decision and what we heard from the justices.
Sure, Whit. So, right, the law was passed in response to the Enron scandal, which involved, among other things, document destruction. But the question here is the statute limited to the context of destroying a document, or does it have broader application? The Justice Department took a look at the statute and said it criminalizes otherwise obstructing or impeding an official proceeding. That is broad language, and it applies to individuals who sought to obstruct the counting of electoral votes to certify Joe Biden as the winner of the presidential election. So they thought the statute actually did cover this conduct, and so they went forward with the charge. What the court here says is you have to look both at the context in which this law was passed, but also surrounding language, which makes reference to documents and records. And again, it's not that prosecutors could never charge, storming the Capitol under this provision of law, but there needs to be, again, a connection to the destruction of records and documents, not just, blocking a proceeding. And that will be the question, among other things, about whether assuming, there's a prosecution that can go forward against former President Trump. Again, we're still waiting for the big immunity ruling. But 2 of the 4 charges, as Devin was saying, come from this statute. So the prosecutors, I think, assuming they can go forward, will have a tough decision whether to try to show that these 2 charges can still succeed against former President Trump after this ruling, or potentially they just drop those two in the interest of time and, kind of streamlining the remaining two charges, one about defrauding the United States and one about depriving citizens of rights, including the right to vote. So they're, I think, going to have a weekend pouring through this decision to decide how to proceed, if at all, using these two charges.
Yeah, some difficult decisions going forward. Kate Shaw, thank you so much. Let's bring in ABC's Chief Justice Correspondent Pierre Thomas. So, Pierre, how is the DOJ likely to respond to this? I know that the number of defendants here is relatively small in terms of the scale of all those who've been charged.
Well, we've been having conversations with sources within the Justice Department to get a sense of what they were anticipating. Obviously, they will be disappointed that the Supreme Court chose to make the ruling that they did. And they know that Donald Trump and some of his supporters will use this as a symbol of government overreach. That said, they're out with numbers that suggest they believe will prove that this has a limited impact, that the number of people actually affected by this ruling is very small. There were 300 and some odd suspects charged and convicted under this particular statute. DOJ is saying that the overwhelming majority of these people had other charges attached to their case, meaning that they would still serve prison time, and they conclude there are only about 27 people that had only this case as the primary charge against them, meaning about 27 people would actually see some likelihood of their sentence being significantly reduced.
All right, Pierre Thomas for us, thank you. ABC's senior congressional correspondent Rachel Scott is also joining us. Rachel's been out on the campaign trail. You were at the debate last night. You were also at the Capitol on January 6th and witnessed this riot as it played out. But how do you think this is likely to play politically for both the Biden and Trump campaigns?
When I was there on January 6th, from the moment the rioters stormed the Capitol, watching police being outnumbered and overwhelmed. Now, 3 years later, the former president has really brought this to the center of his campaign. He has promised to pardon the rioters who stormed the Capitol on January 6th, calling them hostages. Often on the campaign trail, he plays music of rioters who are behind bars singing the national anthem, who stormed the Capitol on January 6th. Even last night on the debate stage, the former president standing by his actions that day. It's a big reason why the Biden campaign is insisting that Donald Trump is a threat to democracy.
All right, Rachel Scott, thank you so much. We appreciate it. Once again, the Supreme Court with another major decision limiting what charges can be brought against the January 6th defendants. We're going to now return you back to regular programming. For some of you, that's Good Morning America. And then our coverage continues on ABC News Live and abcnews.com. And I'll be right back with the entire World News Tonight team later this evening. I'm Wade Johnson in New York.